Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and it is Monday night, which means guess what? Manny Hill is going to join in about a half an hour to pick the Vikings schedule. That should be really interesting. Although last week, Manny did pick a loss to the Detroit Lions, but I'm curious if his confidence was shaken at all, which I want to find out from you guys as well with the loss to the Lions. My personal feeling is I don't think it changed the big picture of the 2024 Minnesota Vikings season all that much, but I could see some of the cracks in the foundation that maybe other people would focus on a little bit more. I tended to give a lot of credit to the Detroit Lions offense. That was the number one scoring offense in the NFL. And maybe part of it is that I have just long believed that great offenses often take down great defenses. And we saw that, especially when it comes to offenses that can block the way that the Detroit Lions were able to block. So, is the confidence shaken? Is the confidence strong? How are you guys feeling? Also, curious about any other questions, thoughts, inquiries, and so forth that is on your minds and how you're reacting a day later. Because trust me, as I'm doing the post game show, I'm watching the comment section fly by, and it can be, you'll never believe this, a tad reactionary. But by Monday night, everybody's had a time to cool off and say, all right, okay, now let me really think about where the Vikings stand. And they've got another game on Thursday night. So you'll be right back at it. Another couple of news items today. Blake Cashman did not practice for the Vikings. I thought that was a huge factor in why they struggled so much against the Lions. Not saying that they win the game, not saying they shut them out or anything like that. But the Lions offense was cooking so much through Jahmyr Gibbs, and the underneath passing game, that's where Blake Cashman lives and has made life so difficult. The other thing is, too, that when you're talking about all those changes at the line of scrimmage that we've discussed time and time again, a lot of it starts with Blake Cashman. So his status for Thursday will be important for that game. Kevin O'Connell did not sound the most hopeful that Cashman was going to play, but said that he was positive about the idea that he would play against the Indianapolis Colts in the following week after he gets a little break for the turf toe and so forth, and should be able to come back at that point. So I'm not certain that we will see Blake Cashman on Thursday night. And when it comes to TJ Hawkinson, Dalton Reisner, there was no real update on whether those players are going to be elevated. Kevin O'Connell gets absolutely nothing out of telling us whether they are going to be elevated for this Thursday's game. I'm sure he would like it to be a surprise when TJ Hawkinson walks out onto that field, but I could very much see it. The way that Johnny Munt played as tight end one, I think has been admirable, but he had a tough outing against the Detroit Lions. TJ Hawkinson seems like he's chomping at the bit and is ready to go. We'll be on definitely Hawkinson watch on Thursday. As far as Reisner at right guard, that's something I still wouldn't be shocked if Reisner goes in and ends up starting. It was not the worst day for Ed Ingram. Actually, Garrett Bradbury struggled more on the post game. I talked about the interior pressure and kind of assumed that it was the right guard, but PFF gave more pressure credit to Garrett Bradbury in the game than Ingram, but I'm not sure that that changes anything about that dynamic with the sample size as big as it is from Ed Ingram for his career. And the other real news item is just that the Vikings game was flexed against the Indianapolis Colts. And kind of like, okay, I guess the Eagles were supposed to play the Jaguars, which is not that different of a matchup. I mean, Indianapolis does have a winning record, and the Vikings deserve a little more national TV buzz, I think, as a 5-1 team. I'm sure that they want to kind of get their hands on the Sam Darnold story a little bit there. And Anthony Richardson is a player that still has a lot of intrigue, I think, because he's a young quarterback and they found a way to win, even though he played really, really poorly. He's just a guy I think that needs so much more work actually playing in games. And I think the Vikings should be favored significantly in that one by the time we get there. and they'll be coming off of an extra long break. So that's one that we should be writing in as, hey, the Vikings should win this game. But now it has a little added flavor to it. I was surprised, though, on the interwebs today when the Vikings announced that the game was being flexed, that there were some people that were unhappy. They were like, I don't want that game flexed. I don't want to see it put on to Sunday Night Football. So I'm curious your guys' thoughts there. Do you not like flexed games? Do you not like the national TV games? How do you feel about national TV games with your team in it? Are you just wounded from many times the Vikings have had the letdown game on national TV, or do you like it? Do you like the energy? Personally, I love it. I mean, I love going to the stadium at nighttime and just having the extra juice to the game. The Vikings always put on a pretty incredible show. They add on to their normal pregame stuff when it comes to those night games. And there's just so much energy in the building that I think it's been really fun over the years. But I also could understand where some people would be like, can I just have my normal Sunday? I don't really want to stay up until, whatever at night and be stressed when I go to bed or something like that. So do you like that it was flexed? Or would you have preferred that it just stayed as a noon game? So before I popped on, got a couple of questions here. I'll run through questions, comments, thoughts, feelings for the next about 25 minutes. And then Manny Hill will be ready to pick that schedule. So JP said Kevin O'Connell shows that he won't adapt. We all know his long developing routes work, but the execution isn't happening. Why not at least bring in some short passes and let to Jordan Addison or run more? Yeah, I think that they did that yesterday. I really do. They threw a lot more underneath passes with not huge success in terms of yards after catch, which I think is a little bit of the problem with throwing short all the time without TJ Hawkinson, which is that there's just not anybody who gets the ball and is Percy Harvin out there and is just going to dodge a bunch of tacklers, or Cordero Patterson. Even Justin Jefferson, as marvelous as he is at everything, yards after catch, I don't see him as actually being all that special in that area. Not in the same way that a Tyreek Hill is. Where he's special is at the catch point, creating separation, the route running down the field. And kind of the same is true for Jordan Addison. Brandon Powell is a little more of that player because he's a punt returner, but they haven't used him almost at all as a wide receiver this year. And Jalen Naylor is really quick. I'd like to see him get the ball a little bit more in those situations. But yesterday, I thought, brought it in a little bit more, reined it in, and then only occasionally took their shots, and it ended up working out. I think that Darnold only threw something like 3 passes that were over 20 yards down the field. Another comment here from I Shot You 99. Every time a question is asked about Turner, the coaches are praising his work ethic and eagerness to continue learning instead of his on-field performance. Is that usually a bad sign? No, I don't think so with Dallas Turner. I think that he, because of his draft status, kind of like people would ask about Lewis Cine all the time, is always going to be a big discussion. How much they gave up for him is always going to be a big discussion. But this is a unique situation. It's not often that you draft someone at a position where you have 2 of the best players in the NFL. Yesterday, the edge rushers, Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, were just phenomenal. They were the best defensive players on the field. Grenard got 9 pressures, which might be the highest he's ever had in his career. Van Ginkel had 2 sacks. You're not taking those guys off the field too often. Patrick Jones has been playing well so far. Jihad Ward has his own kind of unique interior rushing role. So they tried to put Dallas Turner at an inside linebacker spot on a couple of plays. Didn't work. And they said, okay, that's not really something we can do here. We got to go back to our other guys. He hasn't really had a lot of opportunity to just be on the edge and rush and rush and rush and rush. I think that because they like what they see off the field, they're trying to get him onto the field more often. And he's doing things that he usually would not have been doing at Alabama. And this is a very, as Kevin O'Connell put it, a high IQ type of defense that requires experience. I mean, this is why it's worked so far, save for yesterday, is the experience. And I think that is both a strength and a shortcoming at times. It's not something you can just plug and play anybody in. And maybe that was a little bit of the part without Blake Cashman, but we also just have to let players develop. With rookies, everybody wants them to get drafted and change the franchise immediately. But you look at maybe a Rashawn Gary, for example, took him a couple years, eventually became a great player. I can't judge Dallas Turner when the guys that are playing ahead of him are so good. And okay, you could say, well, why did they draft him then? Well, I mean, number one, you can move Van Ginkel around a little bit. That could be part of it, the thought process. But it's also that Van Ginkel's on a 2-year contract. You're probably looking at developing Dallas Turner this year, using him a little bit more off the edge and continuing to develop him until his second and third year, and then looking to have him take the reins there after that. I think they would have liked him to be a little more of a rotational player, but they just don't take those guys off the field. Van Ginkel and Grenard, when they're that good, they honestly just don't take them off the field. So I am far from ready to judge anything with Dallas Turner other than to say what they tried yesterday is probably not in his skill set to be able to do right now in the NFL. And maybe over the next 2 years, he trains to be the next Andrew Van Ginkel type. But I would like to see him get more pure edge rush types of rushes. And maybe we'll see that as the season goes along. But I just think, I mean, we're 6 games into his career. I don't want to, and if he was a starter or had an opportunity to start and he was doing nothing or they weren't putting him in, this would be very different. He's sitting behind 2 Pro Bowl caliber type of players. So I don't know. I just want to give that a lot more time for Dallas Turner. But, you know, I think that as emphatically as they have talked about him and they're trying to get him onto the field, I wouldn't say, oh man, what a bad sign the way the coaches talk about him. Jason asked, the Vikings lost that game more than the Lions won it. Offense had a chance to put it away and failed. In my experience covering all sports, the fans of one team always think that their team blew it, the losing team. And the fans of the winning team always think their team won it and never think the other team gave it away. It's just how it works. If you are on Detroit's side and they had lost the game, they would have said they gave it away because of the fumble. They would have said they gave it away because of 5, 6, 7 other things that they did throughout the game. They would have maybe blamed the referees for some of the calls or whatever. I understand what you're saying. The Vikings missed an opportunity to potentially put the game away. The game is not over if they get a first down on 3rd and 4, but you know that they missed that opportunity for sure on whatever happened on that rollout, which Kevin O'Connell sort of explained today on 3rd and 4. I kind of would have liked to have seen them run the ball there or go a little shorter as opposed to running a route that's 5, 6, 7, however long, what was it, 10 yards more than they needed. I would have preferred something a little bit, just go to the sticks. You just need a first down there. You don't have to make this more difficult than it needs to be, asking your quarterback to roll out, asking him to throw toward the sideline, asking him to throw it more yards down the field than you need to. This is a Hawkinson thing as well. I mean, that's 3rd down and 4. Hawkinson get 5 is kind of a pretty obvious thing that they should be able to improve on going forward. So I thought in multiple occasions, not having him was pretty problematic for them. And the 2-point conversion, I don't know. I mean, yeah, they failed, and it's different if they don't fail. I also thought that was a great play by Brian Branch, and maybe we didn't give him enough credit in the moment for an incredible play. But I just know that always and forever, every team that loses, the fans think our team blew it. And you have to give the Detroit Lions a ton of credit for winning that football game by moving the ball on offense over and over and over and over again. That was really what won the game, I thought, was their consistency in creating first downs, long drives, keeping the Vikings defense on the field and blocking it up for Jared Goff. And then he made play after play, converted 3rd downs. The running back was hard to stop. I mean, it was just a well-played game where it came down to whoever lost the game, we would be saying, wow, man, they let that one slip away. That was a good game. The Pollock 34 says, I don't know why everyone is so disappointed with the loss. We had a competitive afternoon with one of the best teams in the league. Yeah, I mean, I think that the other side of it, though, would have felt so big for the franchise and for where they stand right now to be 6-0 would have really been exceptional. It would have been, whoa, this is 2009 caliber, 1998 caliber. And now you have to not slam on the brakes, not even really press them down, maybe just touch them. Maybe just touch the brakes a little bit because, all right, somebody else is the best team in the NFC. Now, you're probably the second best team in the NFC. And as Jason mentioned, you had a chance to win a game against the best team. Also, though, your team is at home and they put up a lot of yards, and there are some mistakes there that kind of keep happening over and over again. The pre-snap type of stuff has been very frustrating. The waste of timeouts, the interior pressure. It's kind of that we've got to the point where it's the same couple of critiques over and over again for this team. And you wonder, is that going to be, at least on the offensive side, the defensive side, that was new. But do you wonder, okay, can they really stop elite offenses? They're not going to see that many more the rest of this season, but you know that it looks like that, or can look like that, when you face an elite offense. So that might be a little concerning right there. And then when you talk about the offense, just not being able to finish those drives, just a little bit daylight dollar short on some things from being an elite offense. They played very, very well yesterday. They really did. But there's just a couple of those plays that they leave on the table that the other team didn't. And that's how you end up losing it. So I think it's fair to look at it and say, okay, well, we pretty definitively know, because they didn't win that game, that the Lions are still the team to beat. They weren't destroyed at all. They were, I think, overall outplayed. But when you look at the box score, it was really, really close on both sides. Both teams moved the ball, hit big plays, made exciting plays on defense, with the interception by Detroit, with the fumble return for touchdown by the Vikings. So it still feels pretty neck and neck. I mean, you have to give it to Detroit. They went to the NFC Championship last year and were this close to going to the Super Bowl. That's where their expectations are set. They've proven they can do it. The Vikings are still trying to prove they can do it. Had they won the game, especially the way that they almost did, with the defense making a big play and Darnold charging back in the second half, I think that as it was going on and as they got that touchdown, there was maybe a little team of destiny feeling like, oh man, this is just how it's going to go every week, where this team's going to make a big play. And the guy makes the kick. Okay, well, it's not going to be a perfect season, everybody. And you're still kind of going to be chasing behind somebody else for now, in terms of how you're talked about. 6-0 would have been a little bit different. That I think is probably as far as you can go. If you go any farther than that, I don't know why. If you're saying, oh, they were frauds, or they're just not actually a good team, I don't know why you would go that far. Maxwell says, what do you make of KO's explanation for the third down play that sailed over Jefferson? Sounded like somebody had a route detail wrong, and I'm guessing that person was Jordan Addison. That there's no way that's supposed to be the spacing. So I think Jefferson was in the right spot, but had Addison been wherever he was supposed to be, then it's more of a clear look at it for Darnold, and the throw may have been more accurate had it been a clear look at it, as opposed to into a little bit of messiness in front of him. And that altered the throw enough for Jefferson to not be able to catch it. I thought outside of the 51-yard catch, it was a little bit of, what's going on, Jordan Addison, with this game? Can you line yourself up? And do you have the details right? I don't know. There was something a little bit off there with Jordan Addison in that game overall, and it just sounded like that wasn't where he was supposed to be on that play. At the same time, I've said this before, where when we go back, we can always say, well, the guy was open, and if only Darnold had or if only they had run the right detail there, and then they would have had but a lot of times that is a trend, and we can maybe hint at the idea that some of this stuff is a little too complicated, or just they didn't take the simple path when that was all that was needed on a 3rd and 4. There have been so many times 3rd and short where it's overthinking, trying too hard to get a bigger play when you don't really need one, just move the sticks. This is the third and short thing where they've on third and fourth and 2 or less thrown twice as often as they've run the ball. It felt a little bit, why does it need to be convoluted? Why does it need to require a rollout, sprint out kind of thing? And then you go, well, he was open. He could have made the pass. I know, but is that really what was necessary for that play? And things have to kind of go right there. And one thing went wrong, and then they don't end up converting, and it ends up being very costly. Kerpluppy, I don't think any Vikings fan should be distraught about the game. We competed really well with a team that's being considered the best in the league. I mean, that's, I think, where most people stand right now, which is that that was an exciting game that could have gone either way. It didn't feel like, wow, massively outplayed. You don't belong in the same field as the Detroit Lions. No, they clearly did. They were able to move the ball well enough. They made a big play on defense. They did pressure Jared Goff enough at times and got more sacks than most teams do against him. Got a few pressures, especially from Jonathan Grenard on him when a lot of teams usually don't. And he just made the plays under pressure, and their receivers made the catches that the Vikings didn't always make. And Darnold missed on a couple of throws that normally that's a good enough game to win almost every time. It just wasn't on that day against that team. But I think you can also go through and say, there are times where it just wasn't enough. And there's some of the details that they're not getting right that might be a little bit short of the championship standard that we're holding them to in that game, but also in the Jets game and almost in the second half too of the Green Bay game. And now that the sample has grown a little bit of playing less amazing than they did over the first couple of weeks, you feel a little bit more rocky about where it's going than you would have a couple weeks ago when they beat the Houston Texans and they just played almost a perfect football game top to bottom. It hasn't been that. Since then, the defense has shown a few more cracks in the foundation at times when they've gotten worn down. One injury seemed to impact them quite a bit. So there's some little things to pick at where you'd say, is this going to matter? Is that going to matter? But overall, you shouldn't be saying, let me drop them 43 spots in the power rankings or anything like that. Nathaniel says, biggest wild card this year has been Sam Darnold. Just wait till next year when JJ McCarthy, who we all agree is better mentally, is a full-time starter. I'm okay. So of course, yes, JJ McCarthy is very likely to take over next year, but I'm not adopting this. Just wait till next year. What? They're 5-1. What do you mean? Just wait till next year? No, this team is built right now to be one of the best teams in the NFC. Did you see San Francisco? What happened with them? One of their receivers is in the hospital with pneumonia. The other one is out for the season. So that's the maybe strongest team in the NFC coming into the season that is in peril. Atlanta got smashed yesterday. Washington's quarterback hurt his ribs. So, that team's pretty good, but are they great? Is Jaden Daniels going to get banged up throughout the season because he runs so much? The Eagles might have still a little bit in there. Green Bay is going to be a tough team, but what the Vikings just played this close with the Detroit Lions. What are we doing next year? Huh? What? There's always this, you lose one game, like, wait till next year. You don't have to do that. You do not have to do that today. I don't think, because they are right at the front of the race. We just didn't know whether it was Detroit 1 and Minnesota 2 or Minnesota 1 and Detroit 2. We found that out. It's Minnesota number 2 right now, but only by a hair. And that can change as the season goes along because the upcoming schedule, the Rams aren't that good. Indianapolis is a flex game on national TV, but are they scary to you? Especially with the quarterback against Brian Flores' defense. Is Jacksonville scary to you? Is Tennessee scary to you? They're playing Mason Rudolph now because Will Levis is banged up. I mean, this schedule, Arizona should not frighten you at all. At Seattle, maybe a little, but I mean, Atlanta, after the way that they played and the way that Kirk looked, what are we talking about next year for? I mean, I definitely think in the long run, the expectation will be that JJ McCarthy is a better quarterback overall than Sam Darnold. because that's why you drafted top 10. That's why Sam Darnold only makes $10 million a year. And we do have to have some leeway with Sam Darnold at times because we figured he's going to make some mistakes. He's going to have some breathtaking throws. It's the defense's job and everybody else's to pick up for that. But as far as next year, I'll worry about that in July of next year when we walk out there for the first training camp and probably McCarthy's the quarterback. But I don't think you should be bailing on this season and saying, wait till next year. That's wild to me. They're 5-1. Joe says, what are your thoughts about a 70-yard field goal? Let him kick. Well, they couldn't let him kick from where they were after the 5-yard penalty. That was too far. That's just not going to happen. 73? He's not going to make that. Ask Sebastian Janikowski, who one time was forced to kick a 76-yarder. The ball's just going to run out of momentum. But 68, I would be interested. I still don't know that Will Reichert is going to make it from 68, but I was chatting with Kevin Seifert after the game, and we were kind of talking about what's the odds of making a 68-yarder versus what's the odds of throwing a Hail Mary? It's probably about the same. So let the kid kick. Yeah, go for it from 68. Can he kick for the NFL record? I don't know. But that 58-yarder was really on point. And Reichert, I guess they do need to figure out what the actual limit is, because it feels like the Lindsay Lohan thing, the limit does not exist. That's what it has felt like so far with Will Reichert. Trots out for a 58-yarder, casually just chips it on through. What? So I would have loved to have seen a 68-yard kick. We were talking today, I don't think I ever in my press box seat ever stand up, for any reason. Maybe the Minneapolis Miracle I did, but I think I would stand up to watch that one. I was like, all right, let's see this. Let's see this 68-yard kick. I don't think he would have made it, but maybe there's a 5% chance that he does. I shot you 99. Should Flores put more trust on our front four to put pressure on the quarterback and not have to rely on sending the blitz every time? Run blitzing also seems like a huge gamble that hurt them yesterday. So I think that he's actually done a good job this year of rushing four more often. And against Detroit, it was almost like, let's see if they can stop it. Let's see if they can stop the blitz. Let's see if this great offensive line can really take us on. I thought Ben Johnson did an amazing job of adding extra pass protectors in there. And then Jared Goff against pressure was able to navigate so well. Normally against pressure in his career, there has been issues for Jared Goff, but I think not all pressure is the same. He had to move a couple times and shuffle in the pocket. He did a good job of that, but it didn't feel like he was getting hit and hit and hit. And I think that most of Jonathan Grenard's pressures were more of the hurry variety than the QB hit, which I think should be weighed a little bit differently, because getting hit for a quarterback, not very fun. And they didn't do that too much. They sacked him, but I didn't think that every time he was letting the ball go, he's getting smashed. It felt like it was more just moving off the spot, which is kind of how PFF describes their pressures, which is just if the quarterback, because of the rush, has to move, that's what you get a QB pressure for. And they were able to do that on a number of occasions with some of the blitzes and some of the straight up rushes. But I tend to agree with you that Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel are so good at this that they could lean a little bit more on that. I'm not sure that was the right approach to send as many blitzes as they did against Detroit. Well, I guess the results speak for themselves there, that Goff absolutely shredded the blitz. We don't know what he would have done if he wasn't blitzed on those same plays, because when they didn't blitz, he also shredded them. He had excellent results when he didn't blitz too. And maybe the idea was just, if you give Jared Goff time to throw, he's going to tear you up. And so they were hoping to not give him time to throw. They blocked it up pretty well, and he ended up having a great day against them. I don't have too much questions about what Flores does, though, because when you look at the results against everybody except for one team that's the best in the league on offense, they've been great. That's the only team that's had a lot of success against them. It's pretty hard to get too much into, hey, you should actually be doing something else just because of the one game against the best team. Marley says Flores has to figure out something with the quick pass game, carving up his schemes in late game situations. He stops getting aggressive, which boggles my mind. They, in the last possession, I think they did blitz, and that was what caused it, if I'm not mistaken. I usually do my film piece on Tuesday, so I'll have to go back and look at that. But my impression of that play, based on what Kevin O'Connell said, is that they did send pressure, and that was what ended up causing Jahmyr Gibbs to be so open with nobody around him. But I'll have to look back at it. There have been times where against Green Bay, they dropped back a lot of people, and Jordan Love hit some deep throws there. They also didn't get home on the blitzes. And I think it's just, as we're watching the game, we're not counting the number of guys rushing. So if it feels like, oh, well, the quarterback had time there and then someone was open down the field, they must not have sent pressure, but sometimes the other team just picks it up. That may have been the case there. Jacob says, I don't really care about the whole primetime thing, whatever, it's a regular season game. That's all just another football game. Well, come on, Jacob. It's more fun, isn't it? I think so. I think it just ramps up the energy. All right, let's bring in Manny Hill. What do you think, Manny? Flexed football game. I was pretty surprised, but I like it. I mean, I think it adds extra juice. I mean, Jacob saying, well, I don't care, it's just another football game. I don't know, Jacob. I love showing up to that stadium at 6:00 at night, and then all of a sudden, they used to have the fire breathing dragon, of course, but there's the big presentation, and it's the lights go down and everything, and then you're in front of the nation. It's pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little surprised to see that game get flexed. Maybe is Anthony Richardson back playing?
He played yesterday,
He did
and
play yesterday.
not great. Not great.
Hmm.
He is not throwing the ball very well at all. I will see
Yeah.
where that goes from here, but he just needs to play football. I mean, the guy played one season at Florida and then he gets hurt last year. And so it's still early in his career, but we are kind of bordering on Tim Tebow the way that he's played so far with his passing. And I thought, like Josh Allen and even Jalen Hurts, oh, well, the guy's criticized for his passing, but he's a great athlete. He'll figure it out. Thus far, not so much the case.
Same school, same jersey number at that school too, as the aforementioned Tim Tebow. Scary thought. Uh, yeah, I was a little surprised to see that game get flexed. I thought, just kind of looking at the rest of the Week 9 schedule, I kind of thought, I mean, Detroit and Green Bay probably would is probably the biggest matchup of that week, but that's the national game for Fox, so they wouldn't flex that game. But maybe Dallas and Atlanta, I thought, might have been a little bit more of a candidate for that, just because of
Maybe the
sort of
nation has just had enough of Dallas. Like, I just don't
maybe.
want to see. But I thought, if you've ever seen the Office meme where she says it's the same picture, Jaguars versus Eagles, Vikings versus Colts, it's kind of the same picture. I mean,
Yeah.
I would rather watch Vikings Colts, but only by a hair. I mean, Jacksonville can sometimes play well. I don't know. But nonetheless, it's always great for me. I love that whole, the pomp and circumstance, and the national broadcast shows up and you get a million different TV views and they're talking about your team. And Chris Collinsworth saying, yeah, I mean, here's a guy, and this Christian Darrisaw, and you watch, that kind of thing. I don't know. It's just, feels like your team's a big deal when you're on. And that could be just because we did not have Red Zone when we were growing up, and I didn't have any sort of sexy HBO package or whatever they had back then where you could watch every game. So the national games felt like the biggest thing in the world. And every time I go to one, I'm like, okay, I'm covering the biggest game in the world. This is great. So anyway, I'll get back to your questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and so forth. But it's Monday night. You guys know what time it is. It's time for Manny to pick the schedule. Now, Manny, you picked the Detroit Lions to win the game. You were called a hater. Turns out you were right. Mm-hmm. So let's dive right into it. 5-1 this Thursday night. Rather than a Thursday night show with you and I, it will be me in LA covering that game. Do you think the Vikings beat the Los Angeles Rams?
And very quickly before I picked that game, I kind of figured we were not going to do a show Thursday night, obviously
Right. I'll be
because
in
of
the
the
press
schedule.
box in LA. Yeah.
If you want to get to it, I do have my top 5 favorite Rams of all time.
Oh, oh, would love that.
I did think to put that list together today, considering we were probably not going to have a show Thursday night. But I do think the Vikings bounce back from yesterday, and I do think they come away with a win. The Rams, I know, seem to be playing a little bit better. They got a win over a kind of a bad Raiders team yesterday. But I think despite the travel and the short week, I think the Rams are just an inferior team. And I think the Vikings are probably learned a little bit about themselves yesterday. Maybe they got humbled a little bit. I don't think they were too arrogant going into the game yesterday, but I think they're going to bounce back and come away with a win, and get back to the basics on Thursday night.
I do too. The only thing I would say is that Sean McVay knows Kevin O'Connell as well as anybody in the
Yeah.
entire world. And I just value coaching a lot. And there's 10 coaches in the league that I almost think if every year you went into and bet the over on all of those coaches, and I think Kevin O'Connell is in this conversation. If you just bet the over every single year on them, you'd probably win a lot of money overall. And Sean McVay is on that list. That he is a great coach, and they've rebuilt that defense a little bit. They've caused some problems for opposing teams. Matthew Stafford is, when he's hot, a very dangerous quarterback. I don't think they can protect him, though. And I think the Vikings are going to cause a lot of problems there. The one worry is that Cooper Kupp is back. And that underneath stuff, that over the middle stuff, that's what Detroit was doing. And Detroit just put a lot on tape for Mr. McVay to be able to use on Thursday night. But the short run up, usually the better team wins these games when it comes to the short week. So I agree with your pick. All right, Vikings to 6-1. Let's go on to this national television contest that all of you are mopey about, because you got to stay up at night and watch your team. Colts and Vikings at US Bank Stadium. That will be rocking. What do you think of that?
Yeah, the Vikings will be coming off kind of a mini bye, having played the Thursday night game this coming week. And if it's going to be Anthony Richardson, like I've been saying for a couple of weeks when I've been picking the schedule, I like Brian Flores' odds going up against a guy who's just really struggling to throw the football right now, and make some bad mistakes, and just mechanically it just doesn't look very good right now. He's very young and very inexperienced. I think Brian Flores will be licking his chops after, a couple of weeks, or after having to go up against Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford in the span of 5 days. I think Brian Flores will be able to come up for air a little bit against Anthony Richardson, and I think the Vikings will come away with a win rather handily too, I think.
Okay, on to 7-1, and I have no arguments there. The only thing is the Colts have a pretty good defense, could cause some problems for the Vikings. Looks like with Richardson in, they're going to try to play the let's grind on the run, grind Anthony Richardson 5-yard runs at times, and then have him try to hit a 50-yard bomb. And that is one area that I think the Vikings actually are vulnerable to, is the downfield, the deep downfield pass. If they can get somebody one-on-one, what Flores has done so well, as he has not allowed teams to do that. But when Jordan Love threw the ball down the field, when Jared Goff threw the ball down the field, their receivers were able to beat the Vikings corners, most specifically Byron Murphy Jr. Several times so far this season. But put them at 7-1. Everyone can shake it off with the Lions loss. It'll be far in the distance as they travel south to play the Jacksonville Jaguars on November 10th. The Jaguars did get a win against the most pathetic team in the league, not named the Panthers, but nonetheless a win. What do you think happens in Jacksonville?
I was kind of looking at Jacksonville's schedule over the next 4 weeks, 5 weeks. It's rough. They got the Packers coming up this week. Then they go to Philadelphia, and then they host the Vikings. Then they're at Detroit, and then they host Houston.
Oh my gosh. They could lose every single one of those games.
Doug Peterson might be out of a job soon. I mean, he
Maybe
saved
he
his
should
job.
just stop now.
Yeah.
You don't want to hurt the
Go out
career
on a high
overall
note.
record. Yes.
Yeah, and I think the Jaguars are staring a 5-game losing streak right down the barrel. And I think the Vikings are going to go down there and really take care of business. I just don't think they're very good. They got to win against a maybe the only team in the league that's worse than them in New England. And good for them, but I think that the Vikings are the superior team and they're going to go down to Jacksonville and take care of business.
And this is why nothing changed from my perspective after watching yesterday's game as far as where I think this team is going. Talk about the trade deadline and everything else like that. Like, look at the upcoming teams. If you beat the Rams, there is a roll to get on here. And you now have them at 8-1, and you're not being unreasonable over the next couple of weeks. They should be favored in every one of these games, including the November 17th game at the Tennessee Titans. You're probably more afraid of the Titans if they're playing Mason Rudolph than Will Levis, but by the time they got to the fourth quarter of the game against the Bills, they kind of held them down a little bit, and then the floodgates opened and they got blown out because they are a awful, awful football team. We've got some teams, Manny, that you wouldn't pay 50 cents to watch play football this year. I mean, like Carolina, New England. No matter how much I love football, I might rather watch like Troy on Saturday or on a Tuesday night play Akron or something. There's no way you can make me watch the Tennessee Titans play unless they're playing the Vikings. But that doesn't mean, because you still have a letdown game you have to use. So it doesn't mean it's automatic. Vikings 8-1 going against the Titans. What do you think?
Yeah, I've just never been a fan of the Tennessee Titans. I just, all of their games are just miserable to watch. I mean, Steve McNair was a lot of fun to watch back in the day, but ever since he left, it's just every game that they play seems to be an eyesore. And this will probably continue on November 17th, but I think the Vikings will go down there and win an ugly game. Would Jeffrey Simmons perhaps be wearing a purple uniform? Going for a revenge game at that time? Who knows?
I've been saying I'm Kwesi. I've just been calling their office and being like, hello, this is someone from Princeton. It's Kwesi. Would you trade Jeffrey Simmons here? It hasn't worked. They know it's me. They have caller identification. So 9, and that's also not even any way at all that Kwesi talks. 9-1. To go to Soldier Field and play the Chicago Bears.
I'll put this down as a loss. I think the Bears are playing well, and I think the Bears are going to come down to earth a little bit because they're going into a tough part of the schedule here. But again, I think they're a decent team. It's on the road. That's November 24th, so the weather could be nasty. And I think that might work in the favor of the Bears a little bit more. And so I'll put that down as a loss.
The reasoning on this one, other than they're just not going to run the table. And we kind of kept saying that. And then it's like, well, maybe they could if they could beat the Lions. They didn't beat the Lions, so we can officially say they're not going to go 17-0 this year. It's really just Matt Eberflus. He has been on the right side of things against Kevin O'Connell. They were able to beat the Vikings in a very close game with a worse quarterback last year. And even when Tyson Bagent came in that game last year, it was still Eberflus's defense that gave them problems. And that was with Kirk, who is a better quarterback than Darnold. And Darnold does sometimes maybe see things that aren't there. I'm not saying ghosts. I'm just saying that he will try to fit it into some place that he maybe shouldn't and throw some interceptions and take some sacks that could go against him in Chicago. So now that makes them, are we at 9-2?
Yep.
Going back home after quite the road trip there, Jacksonville, Tennessee, Chicago. It's been a little bit of a tricky schedule for the Vikings this year, but they will then play the Cardinals and Kyler Murray at 9-2 on December 1st.
I think I'm going to use my letdown game here.
Ooh, okay. Panic will be setting in for Vikings fans if they drop back-to-back games to Chicago and Arizona, but You have to use it. That's the rule. Everybody should know that. That's the rule. Manny has to pick one letdown game because it will happen. We just don't know when to make them 9-3. So why is this your letdown game?
I think just because I'm looking at the rest of the remaining 5 games after that, and I don't really view any of those games necessarily being a letdown if they lost it. Even the Atlanta game the following week, I think if they lost that one, Atlanta's got some weapons and Kirk is playing pretty well. If Atlanta came in and won at US Bank Stadium, I almost called it the Metrodome, won at US Bank Stadium, I think obviously, the internet will have some fun with that, with Kirk coming back and getting a little bit of revenge, so to speak. But I think Atlanta's a quality team, and I wouldn't qualify that much as a letdown. I think Arizona would be much more of a letdown type of game.
I'm curious to see how they play against the mobile quarterback. I mean,
Yeah,
Caleb Williams is that, but he's not a running quarterback in the same way that Kyler Murray is, or at least he's run to some extent. Murray's whole career is him running all the time. And with all the blitzes, it's a bit, if you don't catch him, is he going to be able to rip off some big plays? Marvin Harrison Jr. has done a really good job, but I also think random results just happen sometimes in the NFL, and that's why we work that in there. So 9-3 there, as they will then play Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons. We think earlier in the season, I kept saying Michael Penix and the Atlanta Falcons. And after yesterday, I don't know. The Atlanta Falcons are a funny team because they're 4-3, and they really, really should have lost 2 of those games. They were 98% to lose those 2 games. And
yeah,
had they, the discussion about the Falcons has kind of been, oh, well, they're, kind of fun and they're getting their playmakers involved and they've won some and lost some and they've been exciting, as Kirk Cousins teams always are, entertaining. But if they had lost those games, the discussion around Atlanta would be, you're a disaster. And the
yeah.
thing that Atlanta, you haven't picked this yet, but the thing, in my opinion, that makes Atlanta a team that just can't beat the Vikings is they can't pressure the quarterback at all. And I was reading D'Orlando Ledbetter, or is that his name? Is that his name? The reporter from Atlanta. I feel like that's his name. Anyway, so the guy from Atlanta who's covered them forever. I was reading what he wrote this morning about how they just can't get after the quarterback at all. They got Judon. That hasn't helped them. I don't even know how much he's playing, and the offensive line isn't that great. I just don't think it's a very good team outside of a couple of players, but I'll let you pick that.
Yeah, I think, I just don't really see it. Atlanta, and it's kind of ironic that Kirk is quarterbacking them right now. They kind of remind me a little bit of the 2022 Vikings, where they're winning a lot of close games, but you're looking at them and you're saying this team is really flawed. Like this team is not, now they're not, winning games at the same rate as the 2022 Vikings were. Certainly they're not on pace to go 13-4 this year, but they're kind of playing the same type of games that are really close, and they win a game close, and you're like, how did they win that game? How did that happen? How many times did we say that in 2022 with the Vikings, where it was like, how the hell did they win that game? They're so flawed. There's so many issues, particularly on the defensive side. Same type of issues with this Atlanta team. So I think this is an opportunity where, Kirk will, if Kirk is still playing by then, he'll maybe put up some numbers, but I just don't think Atlanta defensively will be able to do anything against Sam Darnold in this offense. So I'll put that down as a win for the Vikings.
The writer's name is D'Orlando Ledbetter. He's a good follow on Twitter about the Atlanta Falcons. So just figured I'd correct that. But to your point, I really want to see how Kirk handles those blitzes. He practiced against those blitzes a lot when he was here, but it was different players who were coming after him. There was no Van Ginkel. There was no Blake Cashman. If those guys are healthy when we get to that point. And also Kirk could kind of shuffle a little. He can no longer shuffle. And that was Jared Goff. Maybe the thing that impressed me the most about Goff is that he is a statue quarterback. he was a statue in the same way that Brady and Breeze were. And I don't compare to Brady and Breeze. He certainly played like it yesterday.
Yep.
And what I mean specifically is the way that he shuffled in the pocket. Those guys were so good at being pocket quarterbacks, but the rush is coming from one side, just a little bit of a shift. If he can't move, which he hasn't been able to this year, that's going to be problematic. And I thought it was really problematic for him against Seattle yesterday. He took some big hits, and there's only so many he could take there. What does that leave our record at, Manny? 10-3, right? 10-3?
10-3. Yep.
Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears, December 16th, coming to Minnesota. What happens?
The Vikings win. I put this down as a win. I think they bounced back from the loss to Chicago 3 weeks prior, and they take care of business at home, and they improve to 11-3.
Okay. I don't have any disagreement there. Caleb Williams, first time at US Bank Stadium. And that, just to circle back to yesterday's game again, that's the thing about Jared Goff. I was watching the decibel meter, which I've kind of become a little obsessed with. And because I'm just an objective measure of how loud it actually is. It was ever so slightly louder yesterday than it was against Houston. And yet Jared Goff, when it hit its peak, 121 decibels, that's rock concert level. That place, it's doing the thing where the sound echoes kind of back and forth off the roof. Goff takes a snap, drops back, complete pass. Oh, where when CJ Stroud was dealing with it, he's freaking out. The offensive line's jumping offside and everything's going crazy. But that's just not the case for guys who have been there. Caleb Williams has not been there. I like that as a win as well. That means 11-3. And now the Vikings go out to a very loud place of their own and play the Seattle Seahawks, who I was starting to worry about, Manny. And then they had a bounce back win. They look like one of those 500 teams that any given week can be great or meh. What do you think happens out in Seattle?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think certainly the Vikings should be able to move the ball on that Seattle defense. I think that's been really, really kind of banged up, especially lately. But, it feels like Geno Smith, who again is another one of those guys, is just kind of up and down. You never really know what you're going to get out of him. When it's good and he's on, kind of like what he was yesterday, it looks really good. There was the touchdown he threw to DK Metcalf right before halftime was just cold-blooded, man. There was 3 Falcon defenders right there, and Geno threw it right on a dime right into that number 14 jersey. So Geno's capable of doing things like that. It's just not always consistent. I think being at home, that crowd still can get kind of crazy in Seattle. I'll put this down as a loss, dropping the Vikings to 11-4.
Okay. Yeah, I think they are capable of rushing the quarterback enough and making some plays on defense. But I agree with you. If you run into hot Geno Smith and he is firing it downfield, they got the receivers to make plays. And I am interested as the season plays out to see how top-notch receivers go against this Vikings secondary. And will the secondary be healthy at that point? So 11-4. And the Vikings come home to play one heck of a football contest. December 29th against Green Bay. This might be a flex game, everybody. It's scheduled for noon o'clocks, but I don't know about that. This one could be the game that gets all the attention from the nation. Do the Vikings beat the Green Bay Packers at home on December, what did I say it was? December 29th.
I think this is going to be the first of 2 consecutive games that the Vikings play on Sunday Night Football.
Yeah.
I think this game is going to be flexed to that night. And I think the Vikings will come away with a win, completing the season sweep over the Green Bay Packers at home. I think it'll be close. I think there will be a lot of electricity in US Bank Stadium, as it always seems to be whenever the Packers come to town. And I think it'll be a close, maybe fairly high-scoring game, kind of similar to what it was at Lambeau Field, or what it ended up being at Lambeau Field a couple of weeks ago. And I think the Vikings will come on top yet again.
12-4, and then on to Ford Field. I was talking with some of the Detroit writers that I know, and I was like, I think I'm going to see you guys. Because in recent years, they have played meaningless games at Ford Field, and I haven't made the trip. And I think that this year I'm going to end up heading out to Detroit. But am I headed to Ford Field maybe for the conference? I think if it's for the division, it's for the conference. I just don't see anybody else, especially with Jaden Daniels banged up a little bit. I just don't see anybody else who's going to go neck and neck. It's either this one or it could be the week before against Green Bay because they're getting hot now as well. But I think it's this one. I think these are the two best teams. Is it 12-5 or is it 13-4?
It will be for the NFC North. I could see Detroit coming into that game being about a 13-3, and somehow if the Vikings win that game and both teams are 13-4, I don't have the what the standings would be in front of me. Somehow the Vikings would win a tiebreaker if they won that game and both teams were 13-4. But I think with the game being in Detroit, if it's for the division on the line, kind of based on what I saw yesterday, I think this is going to be a Detroit Lions win, completing the sweep. And the Lions will finish 14-3. Vikings would finish 12-5. And at that point, probably would be like the 5 seed going into the playoffs. And then going on the road against, the worst division winner, the number 4 seed.
Right.
The Lions would be the Lions would get the number 1 seed in the first round bye.
Yeah, you get penalized there pretty harshly for not winning the division. I did not think of that, but that could be one of those ridiculous. The Vikings are 12-5 and they're going to play the 9-8 team or something that won their division. I'm not really sorting out exactly playoff scenarios right now, but we've seen that happen in the past where the team with the better record is traveling to go face the division winner. And the Vikings might end up being that. 12-5 is a tremendous season for the Vikings, and they would go into the playoffs with every bit the chance. I talked about this not too long ago, but when I researched teams and the threshold to be considered a Super Bowl contender is really 11, but probably more like 12 in a 17-game season. If you go into the playoffs with 12 wins and a top tier point differential and a top defense and a top 10 offense, you got every bit as good of a chance as anybody else to go deep into the playoffs. But not having the US Bank Stadium advantage there to start the playoffs. I mean, that's why this game was potentially big. That's why that game could be absolutely huge. So good stuff. Very curious about everybody's reaction to Manny's list. And let's get back to some of those questions that you all left here, questions and comments about yesterday's game. But I mean, I think that that's a very fair approach here. And one thing we saw Manny just a little bit is, an injury to Blake Cashman can kind of make this not the same. I wonder if there's any injuries in the secondary, if that would be problematic. We also don't know where these teams are going to stand when they face them, and we don't know what they're going to do at the trade deadline. Those are all questions that have to be answered. But I don't think moving the needle very far after yesterday would make any sense. Like I figured that you were going to mostly stay the course, and you did. But if they lost at the end of the season to the Cardinals, then Seattle, then the Lions, we probably would be doing our postseason preview podcast talking about some of the weaknesses that had cropped up throughout the year. But 12-5 would be a dream season still compared to where we thought that they would be. Let's see. I think it's Hannes. It might be pronounced differently. I'm sorry if it is. I get confused about reading and hearing all the KOC criticisms. He's highly successful with a franchise that wasn't when he took over. It was sort of successful-ish when he took over. Like it wasn't a travesty, but it was not like recently phenomenal. Anyway, they had won a playoff game in 2019. He takes over 2022. It's not like they were where the Panthers are or something. The point, though, about KOC is, and I tried to warn everybody, Manny, when you get to 5-0, all of a sudden the microscope comes out.
Yep.
And we start to zoom in because the details matter when it comes to, are you a good team? Are you a really good team? Or are you a Super Bowl caliber team? And I think that we saw some stuff from Detroit that was Super Bowl caliber. We saw some stuff from the Vikings that deserves to be nitpicked. I think Kevin O'Connell is one of the best coaches in the league, deserves the coach of the year right now, and sign your franchise up for another decade of this man as your coach, because you can win a lot of games. But in the right here, right now, 3rd and 4, you got to convert that. You can't ask as much out of your quarterback on that play. The 2-point conversion, you got to find a way. You got like the guys with the false starts, the timeouts, people lining up wrong. Like those things do come back to being criticized on the coaching staff.
The trick play. What was that?
Yeah, I've had my rants, Manny. I'm on 2 already about that. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's stuff like that. Again, I've kind of brought this up a few weeks in a row now with when it comes to KOC is Mike Evans looks like he's grabbing his hamstring. It looks to be down for the Buccaneers. That's not good for them. Somebody's from the Ravens is down too. Anyway, I've talked about this for a few weeks now with Kevin O'Connell of just like there's just times he's a very good coach, but there are times where he's getting a little bit too happy with the pass button, especially like we saw in the Jets game where seemed like every pass from Sam Darnold was just chucking it 40 yards down the field, trying to get the big play when, you have a lead, you have a double-digit lead, and all you need to do is just control the clock. It doesn't mean hand the ball off 3 times and punt, but it just means keep the chains moving, keep possession of the football, milk this game away, stuff like that. Again, the trick plays. Why are we trying to be too cute? Especially in the situation yesterday. Why are you calling that play in that moment when you're trailing in the game and this is a huge game? It's, you maybe try those plays against an inferior opponent that you think you can maybe, maybe against Indianapolis you try that. Maybe. I don't know if you really ever want to do those type of things ever. You know what I mean? Because I think it's just being too cute and just keep it simple. It's just stuff like that. I think that is worth noting when it comes to Kevin O'Connell. I don't think neither one of us are calling for his job. We both think he's a very good head coach. He's done a really nice job overall. But I think, to your point, when you've had that success early on, when you go 13-4 in your first year, and you have some moments last year where maybe some situational football wasn't always the best, and you have some moments this year where you're kind of leaving your head scratching. I think it's all that stuff is open to be discussed and talked about. And listen, I think it's the fact that this team is 5-1 and that we can kind of look at things and analyze it. I think that's good. I think we should be able to do that because, like you have said many times over the last few weeks, the more games that they win, the bigger the microscope is, the more I think the better we feel about this team overall, the more games that they win. I mean, if they're, 9-1 going into Chicago on November 24th, that's going to be a huge game. I mean, it's going to be massive. It might be bigger than the game that we had yesterday for all we know. I mean, it's just so, and I think that's a good thing. And I think that we should be able to watch and observe this team play, nitpick some things when necessary without, not everything has to be pie in the sky, I think, is basically what I'm getting at.
Well, and also just analysis of football is always just so extreme, where if you say, I really don't like this approach to this particular thing, it's why are you a hater, or he should be fired, or whatever. No, it's actually, you said that it's a good thing. To me, it's a great thing. It's the best. It's the best when we can be prying apart all the details of football games, because for so much of our time broadcasting together, Manny, it's been, what are they going to do next off season? Should they do this in the draft by the week 6? I was going through this with Justin Jefferson and his career. How many times by this point in the season was a Justin Jefferson team in his career going, should we trade everybody at the deadline? 2020, 2021, 2023. I mean, that's 4 of his seasons so far it's only really been 2022 where we weren't talking about if they should just sell off everything and tank. So this is a barrel fun for us. But at the same time, like, we are not going to watch a trick play like that or the 3rd and 4 execution or the penalties and go, no, it's fine because he's a good coach. Well, that would be very boring analysis and also just not honest analysis. I also think that, you know how there's a get back coach on the sideline where the coach is going out into the field and they always have a guy whose job it is to be like, get back. And they grab him. You always see that guy on TV grabbing the coach, bringing him back. Kevin O'Connell needs a don't do that coach. They need to give me an earpiece up in the press box and have Kevin go, hey, thinking about running a trick play here. And I go, don't do that. And he's like, okay, all right. I'll just run a regular pass to Justin Jefferson. And then they'll do it. And I will save the day. I will be the don't do that coach for Kevin O'Connell. I'll just give him the, like, he can look up to me and like, nope, that's thumbs down. Okay, we're good. We're good. That's all they need. That's my contribution. Let's see. Matt B says, with Reisner being a full participant today, should we pencil him in for the starter on Thursday? I'd be good with that, Manny. The talk about the run blocking for Ingram being an advantage. I did not think this team run blocked very well. And it's not like it's been game-changing, life-altering Larry Allen out there run blocking. Need better pass protection. It wasn't the worst game that he's had yesterday, but that's not really the point. I would like to see Dalton Reisner on Thursday night's game.
Yeah, I think, not to just pile on Ed Ingram here. There's just instances that I see in games where it's just, you just kind of wonder, like, when is the play gonna happen where it just blows everything up because Ed Ingram whiffed on a guy and Sam Darnold gets blasted and then Sam Darnold gets injured and he's out of the game.
Almost. Almost yesterday.
I mean, and now you've got Nick Mullins playing, and we all know that that's not good. If Nick Mullins is playing the rest of the season because Sam Darnold got hurt, your season's done. It's over.
Right. Reisner allowed 0 sacks last year. This is his thing. He pass protects well. So let him do that.
Yeah. I think you just, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, this is a good one for you, Manny. I think people know my feeling on this. Benjamin says, did anything you saw yesterday solidify or change your mind in terms of trades that they should try to make at the deadline? What do you think?
It didn't change anything for me because I think that they should still strongly consider making a move, whether they would have won the game yesterday or not. I mean, I think you're in a very unique situation in that you're one of the 2 best teams in the conference, and the other best team in the conference just beat you yesterday. And even if you would have found a way to win that game, if they would have tried to kick a 70-yard field goal with Will Reichert and he drilled it and you won the game 32-31, I still would have came out of that game thinking, yeah, maybe they need to trade for an interior defensive lineman to get a little bit more pressure. Maybe they do need to make a trade for, another corner to add some depth back there in case one of those guys gets hurt, or because Byron Murphy Jr. is struggling a little bit. I don't think it changed really anything for me because I think this is a unique opportunity for them to maybe go on a run here. And if you can make a move to help solidify a position, to kind of help you out, I think there's nothing wrong with that, and there's no shame in it.
I agree with you. If the opportunity presents itself, do it. Jackie says our fans are so knee-jerk and terrified of failure. Enjoy the season, folks. We are 5-1 and lost by a hair to one of the best teams in the NFL. We are about 9-1, 8-2 RELAX. One thing is that what would Vikings fans be if not terrified? I mean, would they understand the feeling of not like existing, watching football and not being terrified? I'm not sure that that's possible based on all the things that have happened. Enjoy the season, folks. Remember, my mantra for the whole thing is let's just see what happens. And I have changed that a bit because they've raised the bar. And so the let's just see what happens has now been raised to you have real expectations. That's also scary. because let's just see what happens. If it was every other week, oh, that was a great game, that was a bad game, whatever. JJ McCarthy's in the future. But now all of a sudden, well, actually, when you lose, it hurts a lot more because you are being talked about as one of the best teams in the NFL. So I think that that's what got people a little worked up, is that 6-0 would have been so good for this team.
Yeah.
Not quite there, and by a hair is correct. Joel says the Vikings have faced defenses every game this year that have been in the top 11 in pass defense by EPA per pass. The next 7 rank in the bottom half, except the Bears. Thoughts? My thoughts are that, Manny, when you pick the schedule, that we factored this in because they don't have a very difficult schedule coming up. And we could see Sam Darnold start to get some momentum and really get on a run here in the middle of the season, because you're exactly right. They have faced a lot of very good defenses so far. And I don't know if I would say the Lions are a very good defense without Aiden Hutchinson. That's a big factor there. But Darnold played really well in the game. They have playmaking guys. Some of them made plays. But overall, yeah, I mean, the Jets, San Francisco, they've played good defenses. I expect Sam Darnold to get on a roll here.
I do too. I think especially if you insert Dalton Reisner into the lineup and the pass protection improves, you get TJ Hawkinson back into the lineup here pretty soon too. I think that's going to help with some of that short to intermediate stuff that maybe we're not seeing enough of out of that tight end position, because I just don't think a lot of respect for Johnny Munt. I just don't think he's that guy that can really do a lot of that. As we saw yesterday, 4 catches for 8 yards is not going to do it. Having a guy like TJ Hawkinson back in the lineup, I think, will help with some of those like 9 to 11 to 12 yard passes for Sam Darnold, to where he doesn't feel like he has to push the ball down the field all the time. And I think that's an opportunity, especially against lesser opponents, defenses that aren't as good as what you've been seeing so far. I think that's an opportunity for this offense to get even better. Got to stay healthy, obviously, avoid the major injuries. Aaron Jones who was good again yesterday. Man, I mean, continuing to have him as healthy as possible is going to be huge too.
Let's see. Hold on. Sorry. Let me go to the fans are largely in favor of the trade. Deontay says everything's saying make a splash trade, get the guy that'll send the team over the top. Lee 72 need to go full Rams for a defensive tackle. Kwesi can identify free agents, but drafting is a different story. I'm not. Just real quick, Kwesi's drafted so few players that I really think, I mean, if you took a random sampling of Rick Spielman's draft picks, you could make him look like the best or worst GM ever. What is Kwesi had, like 15 picks over the 3 years, and one of them is Jordan Addison. Anyway, they've also been really good in the undrafted free agent market. We don't need to get into that whole thing, but I don't think you're running away from drafting people because you think the GM is bad at it. I think the reason that you're looking at free agents and trades is because your team is 5-1 and you're ready to win. And they did a great job in free agency. So just want to throw that out there.
2022 was a bad draft, people. It's over. Let's just move on. Forget about it.
We've moved on.
It's been pretty good since then.
Josh Metellus, who, if scene works out, doesn't play, again, made a big play yesterday for them, as he's done all the time. Football's funny like that. The Drew Bledsoe was the number 1 pick in the draft, and Tom Brady was the 6th round pick, and one of them was a better quarterback. So I don't know. Football's just funny like that. Anyway, let's see. Mike says, still believe they should do what they can to add interior pressure rusher and the best corner they can get at the deadline, if those things are possible. Steel Horse Travel says, am I crazy to think Darnold is a high-end backup? Well, let me see here. Sam Darnold currently has a 104 quarterback rating. That doesn't sound like a high-end backup to me. If you've looked around the league at the backups, Nick Mullins might be a high-end backup. I mean, the high-end backups, Marcus Mariota is a high-end backup. Mason Rudolph is a high-end backup. I think what Sam Darnold has proved through these first couple weeks is that he is a starting quarterback in the NFL. The issue sometimes, though, is that players exist on this fringe where they're talented enough, and this might be Mariota, honestly, that if they're in the right offense and they have the right coach and the right receivers and the right line, that they can look like a very good starting quarterback. And if they're not, then they can look like a high-end backup. And I think that it's been proven over these 6 games with Sam Darnold that we can see exactly what happened in the past in his play now. You can also see when he throws that ball to Jefferson and he floats through the air in slow motion. I want NFL Films music behind that thing. You go, that's what didn't happen in the past when Sam Darnold was playing. So, no, I think he's clearly a starting quarterback on a good team that can win a lot of games and be right in a game. I thought the way that he bounced back yesterday, Manny, in the second half, that's not something you expect from a backup quarterback. That's something you expect from a guy who is a starter on a team that's competing for something.
I think whether it's the Vikings or somebody else, somebody's going to pay Sam Darnold a pretty good chunk of change next season, and he's going to deserve it, and I think he will have earned it, and he will have earned an opportunity to be somebody's starting quarterback next season, whether it's here or somebody else, who knows? But I think he's done enough in these first 6 games to justify, like, if you're if you have him as your starting quarterback, if your roster is at the bare minimum solid, you can go in with Sam Darnold and compete and be all right. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think Sam Darnold is fine. I think overall he's been pretty good, and that's that. It's fine. I've got no gripes with him right now, really.
And I really think that it's a good point by the commenter earlier about the defenses that they faced and that are coming up, that there is a opportunity here for Sam Darnold to really show how good he can be. And he's done that in spurts. He's done that for full games sometimes, for half games sometimes. And yesterday was a little more of a half game. But when you look at the end of the day and you have 9.5 yards per pass attempt and an 80% completion percentage, and your team put up, and I know they got the defensive touchdown, but X number of yards, the same number of yards as the Detroit Lions. They need a little bit of play calling there not to do the trick play. They need a third down conversion. They need that interception not to happen. But those are things that would maybe go on if your quarterback was Jared Goff instead of Darnold. That's an elite quarterback in the league. Your quarterback is a good one. And they're continuing to elevate his play over a stretch that is now almost half of the season for Sam Darnold. And if we were to add up how many good games has Darnold had versus bad, we just put him in those buckets. I think it's probably 5 good games and 1 bad game just against the Jets. And they found a way to win that one. If he even gives you 50-50 the rest of the way, they can beat some of these bad teams without great performances by Darnold. But if he even gives you 50-50, and at the end of the season, you're talking about 10 or 11 out of 17 really good games from your quarterback, that's starting quarterback level stuff. And that would be totally worth what they paid him and give them an opportunity to potentially go deep in the playoffs. Just the Super Bowl Vike RB2 needs to be Akers starting Thursday. I agree. The holding penalty on Ty Chandler, you just went, and there it is again. That's why Kevin O'Connell keeps running out Aaron Jones, even if he's dragging a leg, is Hawk and Cash playing Thursday night. Hawk and Cash is a 1980s movie with Sylvester Stallone and Jean-Claude Van Damme. Hawkinson, I think yes. Cashman, I think no for that one. But you agree it's Cam Akers should be in the game after this.
Yeah, I mean, if not, why'd you trade for him? Why'd you bring him back? You know what I mean? I think the idea of bringing him back was that so he could be RB2, and he should be RB2. And, maybe you can still mix in Ty Chandler in some spurts if you think you can hit him on a big explosive play somewhere. He's got the capability of that. But yeah, the holding call, the misses in pass protection that we've seen, you just can't have it. You need Sam Darnold to be healthy. You know what I mean? And you got to have everybody clicking on all cylinders. You got to have guys out there that are going to do what they need to do to be on the football field. So I think it makes all the sense in the world for Cam Akers to be out there in the backfield much more often than Ty Chandler at this point.
And even though they made up for it you can't wipe a 30-yard play off because and I think it was a blitzing, maybe linebacker or safety. It wasn't like he got matched up with one of their big defensive linemen or something. They just need that. And Cam Akers over his career has been a top-notch pass protector. I'm sure that's one of the reasons that Kevin O'Connell likes him so much. I agree with Preston here. Cashman is the most important piece on the defense and the way Jonathan Grenard has been playing, but I definitely think
Boy,
that
they
we
missed him
saw
yesterday.
that. Yep.
They missed him yesterday big time.
Yeah, I mean, because he's just the head of the operation. He's like the manager out there. He gets the calls, he makes the changes. And I got to think that maybe some of those blitzes would have been a little bit different or the adjustments would have been a little bit different. Ivan Pace is a guy who I would much rather have just playing with his hair on fire. Just go out there and don't think. Eric Hendricks was kind of like that, where Eric Hendricks, when Anthony Barr could handle all of the things that Mike Zimmer was asking him to intellectually, allowed Eric Hendricks to just go play fast. And that was a great dynamic for them, which I think is a great dynamic with Cashman and Ivan Pace Jr. But when he's out, they're just a different defense. So as far as his performance coming back from the turf toe, whether it's Thursday or the next week, I'm guessing it's the next week. You're going to see, I think, a different feel to the defense when that happens. Let me scroll. Let's see. I'm trying to get to the point where people are reacting to what your picks. There's a lot of back and forth commentary. Sometimes it's sort of funny about how this is actually funny. Derek says 22, 23, and 2024, Addison and Reichert as far as the draft. Jalen Naylor looks like a pretty good draft pick. Also, you know who else looks like a pretty good draft pick, or at least the use of one, is TJ Hawkinson. That looks like a pretty good use of it too. And if that's what they end up doing with their next year's draft pick, I think that's why I'm comfortable with it, Manny, because you can get players on contracts that will help you win right now. And you've got the cap space to be able to use it that way. Jay says, whoever comes out of this division will have earned it and will be battle tested, hoping it's, this is a Lions fan, Lions, of course, but I think the competition benefits both the Lions and Vikings, F the Bears and Green Bay. That's funny, Jay. How would you do it right now, Manny? We got to kind of update this each week of the final standings for the NFC North. How do you think that would end up playing out?
Well, right now I've got the Lions finishing in first place, the Vikings finishing second, Packers third, and the Bears finishing fourth, which is pretty much, I think last week that's how I had it as well. Maybe I had the Vikings finishing in first place and the Lions second. But yeah, I mean, I think I think this division is really good and deep. I think all four teams are good and competitive. I still think the Bears are going to come back to earth a little bit. Their schedule just gets tougher. But them coming back to earth might mean them being like 8-9 or 9-8. And I think for where they're trying to go, you know, and improving off of last year, I don't think that's a bad place for them to be, considering that they'd be starting a rookie quarterback for the whole season. So if the Bears are 9-8 and finish in last place of the NFC North, I don't think that's anything for Bears fans to be upset about or ashamed of.
All right, let's do a check-in on my pick'ems for tonight's Monday Night Football game as it stands right now and see how we're going. And we'll talk about underdog fantasy for a second. And then I want your all-time Rams before we check out for the evening. So here's what I had on underdog for tonight. I had Lamar Jackson lower than 231.5 passing yards. Baker Mayfield higher than 259.5. Isaiah Likely higher than 26.5 receiving yards, and Justin Tucker higher than 2.5 extra points. So let's take a check-in for how that's going right now. Lamar Jackson has 121 yards passing on 6 throws and 2 touchdowns. So I just need one more extra point from Justin Tucker to hit on that one. Yep. Isaiah Likely has 1 catch for 10 yards. I feel pretty good about that. He's only got to get to 27. And what is my other one? Baker Mayfield. So how is he doing? If they're playing from behind, he's got 133 yards. That's almost exactly halfway there to 259.5. Maybe I will hit on this one, and that will be exciting. And you can play along too with our pick'ems over at Underdog Fantasy. It's something we've been doing all season, and you guys have done a great job using the promo code PURPLE. Sign up and play. It helps the show. It's a ton of fun. Easiest place to play fantasy sports. You know how long it took me to put that together, Manny? About 11 seconds is how long it took. I scrolled, I saw, I picked, and then I was playing. And you can do that too. So we'll see. I might go 4 for 4 there. And if you go 5 for 5, you can win 20 times your money with the pick'ems as well. Also, just a reminder, NBA season is kicking up, and Underdog Fantasy has plenty of deals and free picks and offers and things like that for the NBA season kicking off. You'll want to play along when you go to Wolves games, of course. So make sure again that you sign up with the code PURPLE to claim your special pick and first time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Must be 18 or older. Terms apply. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. Now, Manny, I am extremely curious to know who your all-time favorite Rams are. Fire away. I want to hear this. There are so many options.
Yeah, there are a ton of options, and there's some guys who I really loved as players that I'm not including on this list. Some guys who, a couple of guys who have gold jackets in Canton as well that I'm leaving off this list. But number 5 is a guy who left on this list that does have a gold jacket. One of the greatest running backs of all time, Eric Dickerson. Just an all-time great. Kind of had a very unique running style. Kind of, when Adrian Peterson came into the league, he drew some comparisons to Eric Dickerson, just with kind of the upright running style that he had. And ED was just one of the best, one of the all-time greats.
I mean, the all-time season from Eric Dickerson, but more than anything, players now have kind of their standard stuff. They wear sleeves, they wear leggings, whatever it is. Where's a guy with goggles? Where is a guy with goggles? Where is the one thing that somebody has that they wear that makes them stand apart? Eric Dickerson had those. I wasn't quite enough to see a lot of Eric Dickerson when I was growing up. I believe I remember, if I'm not mistaken, he had a very brief run with the Raiders at the end of his career. And I kind of remember how sad that was. But I mean, of course, one of the guys that you would put on the Mount Rushmore of all-time Rams, Eric Dickerson.
Great neck roll too. Had the
yes,
neck roll
yeah, it just kind of flopped around. What was he even doing there? It just flopped around as he ran. It didn't protect anything or help him. It was just a vibe. That's what I'm saying. Players don't just wear random crap on their bodies just because anymore. They have a reason for it.
Number 4, there's a couple of reasons why this guy is on my list of favorite Rams of all time. One, because he actually had some decent moments as a player, quarterbacking the Rams in the late 80s. It's Jim Everett. And
oh, really?
Jim Everett's one of my favorites everybody remembers the Jim Rome thing. Obviously, it's kind of unfortunately, that's what Jim Everett is mostly remembered for, is the Jim Rome incident. But Jim Everett took the Rams to the NFC Championship game. I think it was 1989. Had a really good season that year with the Rams. By the time he left and went to New Orleans, wasn't quite as good towards the end of his career, but played really well during his time in LA with the old Rams in the 80s. And he also follows me on Twitter as well.
Really?
So
wow. Okay.
He does. So that's my claim to fame.
Is that your most famous follow on Twitter? The most famous person who follows you?
Might be, yeah. I think it might actually be the most famous person that follows me on Twitter. But I
didn't think who mine would be. Okay. Wade Phillips is definitely up there. Once upon a time, Wade Phillips accidentally blocked me. And then I had Wade Phillips on my radio show and convinced him to unblock me. So Wade Phillips then followed me. So there you go. There's the Wade Phillips on Twitter. Okay. So Jim Everett, he was huge arm, big giant dude, and made a huge mistake going to the New Orleans Saints, because before Drew Brees, there was no more comical franchise, I think, than them. They had so many close runs with the Dome Patrol, and then they were just a joke. the entire time that he was there. That was too bad. But also, I mean, what Jim Rome did then would just get you so fired now by
Yep.
far, and kind of tells us a little bit where we've gone with sports talk, that used to be like an acceptable thing to do. And I was on Jim Everett's side and 100%.
As was I.
Number three.
Number three is a guy in Canton and absolutely deserves to be there. One of the greatest offensive linemen of all time, was a Heisman Trophy candidate as an offensive tackle at Ohio State. I think it was the year, if I'm not mistaken, it was the year that Eddie George, his Ohio State teammate, actually won the Heisman. But Orlando Pace, one of the all-time great left tackles in the history of the sport. Good guy, great player. And the fact that an offensive lineman can be nominated for the Heisman Trophy is just absurd. But I think it also goes to show you just how incredibly good he was at Ohio State, and obviously ended up being a great player in the NFL as well.
And of all the players that get credit for the whole greatest show on turf and everything else, I mean, there were so many weapons and everything else. The offensive line just doesn't get really talked about. But when it came to Orlando Pace, his size and his ability to move at that size, there are things that Darisaw does that remind me of that. There's a clip that's going around of Darisaw flipping around back the wrong way to block somebody that he just sort of sees escape and head toward his quarterback, and it results in a huge first down for Sam Darnold. That's the type of stuff that Orlando Pace used to be able to do. Just anything. That rock solid guy over there in the left tackle position. So no disagreement there. That he goes under the category of guys that I just wish I saw more of, like on television, his career, because I feel this way about Andre Johnson when he was going to the Hall of Fame. Man, I just wish that there had been more games that I got to see, because of the lack of red zone and the lack of, you could go to whatever random internet website that streams the game that might be illegal. We just didn't have as much of that. Number two on the list.
Number two is Kurt Warner. And the reason why Kurt Warner is one of my favorite Rams ever is you literally, I know they turned his story into a movie. It was a pretty good movie, by the way, Underdog, a couple of years ago. Yeah, it's pretty good. I enjoyed it.
I didn't see it.
I enjoyed it. It was a little on the cheesy side, but I enjoyed it. It was entertaining. They probably, I think they did Mike Martz a little bit of a disservice in that movie. They kind of portrayed him as being not a very nice guy, but I don't think Mike Martz was happy about his portrayal in that movie either. But still, like, I know they turned Kurt Warner's story into a movie, but you couldn't make his story up, man. Like the way he just came out of nowhere and only was playing because the guy in front of him got hurt, and then to step in, be the MVP of the league, be the Super Bowl MVP, and have a season for the ages like that, and then turn around a couple of years later and win another MVP, almost win another Super Bowl, then to kind of revitalize his career in Arizona and get them to a Super Bowl. Just a remarkable story. I know he had that down stretcher when he went to the Giants, where it kind of looked like his career was going to be over at that point. But his run in St. Louis for those couple of years before he left there was really unheard of, and just an awesome run for him. So Kurt Warner's number two on my list.
With Kurt Warner, I'm glad that it happened then and not now, because everyone would have ruined it the same way that they did with Brock Purdy last year. They would have just ruined it. It would have been, he's not even that good. It's just his receivers. It's just Orlando Pace's left tackle. It's just Marshall Faulk. He's not even any good. That it would have been 100 weeks in a row until they actually won the Super Bowl of people complaining that it was fake and he wasn't actually that good because he wasn't drafted and nobody had a high draft grade on him and whatever. It just would have been miserable to watch that team. And instead, we just let it play out and didn't have all that noise and constant questioning and everything else. We're just like, whoa, this guy's amazing. And that was it. And sometimes, Manny, I wish for simpler times. I wish that I could go to a ballpark and have a ticket that got me in the game. Simpler times. Instead of having to download an app, but the 5G isn't working, you walk into the gate. We dealt with that with the Lynx a little bit the other night. So, number one on your list.
My number one favorite Ram of all time is really couldn't be anybody else. It's Torrey Holt.
Oh,
I
yeah.
absolutely loved watching Torrey Holt run routes, make great. The guy was just an absolute machine. Wasn't a super huge wide receiver. You know, he kind of. I mean, Justin Jefferson's obviously all world and amazing, but I think the way Justin Jefferson is so detail oriented with the way he runs routes, the way he catches the football. It reminded me a lot of what Torrey Holt was and at his peak with the Rams. You know, obviously with Kurt Warner, but later on when Mark Bolger was throwing him footballs in the mid 2000s, he was absolutely incredible and without question my favorite Ram of all time.
Love that. The ball tracking, always and forever.
Yeah.
Really, really, the ball tracking is where anything that gets put up in the air, and this is where we shouldn't penalize quarterbacks who put the ball in the air for their receivers to go get it. And that's what Kurt Warner did with no fear for Torrey Holt down the field, one of the most exciting players. I always liked him a little more than Isaac Bruce. For that reason, but of course, Isaac Bruce is a phenomenal player. There's so much here. So I'm just going to run through a few. Now, if we go way back, Roman Gabriel, one of the all-time great quarterbacks, 6'7", super fun, competitive quarterback way back in the day. Fearsome Foursome, Deacon Jones, Merlin Olsen. Some of my youngest memories are Merlin Olsen doing color analysis on TV, but they were just phenomenal for many years. And then you get into the era you're talking about, which is when we were both growing up. You had Aeneas Williams was a great story, game-changing player. For me, Marshall Faulk was one of my probably 5 favorite players of that entire era because he could do everything. And I remember how much they talked about running backs in the future are all going to look like Marshall Faulk. And it turns out that they don't, because you can't do all that stuff. And Aaron Jones sometimes reminds me of him when he ran a deep over. You're like, wait a minute. How that's a Marshall Faulk type of thing. You almost never see a running back running an over route and catching a ball full speed on the run the way that Aaron Jones did. So he goes up there. Dexter McCleon, London Fletcher, the undersized linebacker who was just a beast for them. And then you kind of have the dark ages, a little bit of the Rams, and the most recent Rams, Andrew Whitworth, another left tackle, good broadcaster, really smart guy, and a mountain over there. And I always thought that the shift in that franchise from they are a joke, they drafted at the top, Case Keenum was their quarterback, to what they're the top offense. I think it started when they signed Andrew Whitworth over at left tackle. So this game I think is probably going to give us a lot of entertainment. I think the Vikings should win. I will clearly pick the Vikings to win. They're the better team in this game, but I also do not think that you should completely dismiss the Rams just because they've had some tough matchups. They barely lost to the Packers. They're coming off of a win. They're getting a little bit healthier, and they have one of those great coaches in the league. So anyway, great stuff, Manny. Great stuff, chat. And we'll have Jeremiah Searles, the usual run up to the game, as condensed as we can make it. And then the post game from the press box in Los Angeles, if I can find it. That was a discussion at TCO Performance Center today. Who will be able to actually find the press box in LA and get out of it, because it's not easy. So anyway, great stuff, Manny. Thanks so much for your time as always, man. Appreciate it.
You got it. Football.
And thank you all so much. And we will catch you all in the very near future. See ya.